I'm not saying don't use it.
Right. I know. I know how you feel generally.
My concern is that health professionals, the people that are able to prescribe this, I won't say that they're not doing it. I'll say that maybe they're not effective in communicating the intense need to do the lifestyle change along with this, that it's going to work. You're going to drop a ton of weight. Also, if you don't change the internal, it's not going to last. Welcome to the show. Today's episode is going to be ever so slightly different. When setting up to record a different segment, something we had pre-planned, Dante, Josiah, and I started talking about the super popular GLP-1 agonists, Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, all those guys. The cameras had just started rolling, and normally we'd stop talking about whatever we're talking about and stick to the planned subject, but not this time. This time, we were having so much fun that we just kept talking. And the result was too good not to share. So you're going to see that. In addition to that, we've got Joey talking about Flora Essentials, one of our foundational probiotics, and going into detail about exactly what is in the bottle, how it all works, why it's there, and who should consider using it. That's my big concern with Ozempic, is let's just pretend for a second that it's a miracle drug and there are functionally zero side effects and it works great. Just pretend. What concerns me is that people don't experience the identity change necessary to live out the steps that keep you healthy. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I'm not concerned that I'm going to become obese because I have worked so hard that I have mentally changed who I am. I work out. I go to the gym. Even if I don't feel like it, I go to the gym. I work out. I get up excessively early to make sure that I can go to the gym because it's that much of a priority to me. But that was not who I was. That was literally not my identity 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And if I could have waved a magic wand and dropped a bunch of weight, which sometimes it felt like happened, you know, you get sick and then some things happen and you're just busy and you don't eat a lot and you look up and you've dropped 15 pounds. Oh, cool. Awesome. I made it. I'm skinny now. And then it just comes right back because the behaviors didn't change because the identity, who I was, hadn't changed. Anyway, that's my concern with Ozempic is that too many people experience the magic wand without internalizing the identity change necessary to take the steps to stay healthy. And they're getting off of it. If I see another article about what to do when you come off of Ozempic, I'm like, I don't think you're supposed to come off of Ozempic. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, no, I like this conversation because I think I could offer plenty of pushback for the sake of conversation.
Oh,
you know,
well,
because I definitely view it as I have the same immediate reaction to that as well.
Right.
Is that suddenly I feel like, holy heck, it takes a lot of effort, conscious awareness. It takes a lot,
yes,
to engage in those behaviors,
right,
to make time to grocery shop and buy the certain things and avoid other things. And you know, when you're at a social engagement, which they're more frequent than not, to try to avoid certain things.
Yeah.
To leave a gathering at 9 p.m. instead of 11 p.m. because of something you have planned the next day. Like those sorts of things that sometimes they frustrate me on a personal level because those things feel incongruent with what my aspirations are, or what my view of a healthy lifestyle is. Now, I'm not also saying that that's 100% right either, or it puts me on some higher ground than somebody else.
No,
but what I will say is kind of like sticking to the issue. It is, for whatever reason, I think easier for me, easier for you than, for example, the person Josiah mentioned.
Sure.
And so being cognizant of, just because my experience, just because I went through this and I'm doing that, doesn't mean that person's is even that much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I'm not saying don't use it.
Right. I know. I know how you feel generally.
I feel my concern is that that doctors, health professionals, the people that are able to prescribe this aren't, I won't say that they're not doing it. I'll say that maybe they're not effective in communicating the intense need to do the lifestyle change along with this, that it's going to work. You're going to drop a ton of weight. Also, if you don't change the internal, like, it's not going to last. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't use it.
Yeah. The part that I can't get past is just that there hasn't been anything to this point that I'm aware of that has enabled people to begin to make easier conscious choices over those decisions. That's why it's like, that's kind of where the buck stops for me, is that whenever somebody's deciding I'm going to lose weight,
right?
I'm going to, start lifting more. I'm going to start shopping this way. I'm going to start doing that. They have it's information overload. It's decision overload. What changes first? Is my cholesterol more important? Should I try to get my blood pressure down? Should I, there's all these things that happen that suddenly now there's something that can immediately put them in the driver's seat over what I think is probably the hardest part about behavior change around diet.
Yeah.
And that's just
craving,
kind of
desire,
craving. And exactly. And now I'm not saying that I'm sure that there are people who still can't, or who are unable to override those signals, or maybe less responsive to those drugs. I mean, certainly, yeah, we hear and see about the people that lose 20% of their starting body weight on tirzepatide. Sure. But at the same time, there are people who go to titrate up and up and up on doses, and theoretically it still kind of wasn't enough. And to your point, there is something to be said about more. There's more to this, to the story, definitely. Yeah. But again, if you enable people to just almost like without thinking, they immediately begin to make better choices without even having to having conscious control over it anymore. Right. So it's like they just inherently are making better decisions suddenly. Yeah. Spontaneously. Yeah. Which is that is just unreal. I'm jealous of that. Truly. I think if that's my biggest qualm, right, is that I feel like it is so hard to constantly have to be in control of those things. Yeah. That now suddenly people don't have to worry. Mm-hmm. Like truly, you go to these social events, and it doesn't matter. Like as an example, I'm sure this is how it plays out. You go to a birthday party and there's fried chicken and cake and cookies and pop. I mean, it's just complete overload of those sorts of foods. Yeah. Whereas before, I know when I do go to those things, I can't stop myself usually. Yep. And now you have people who they can go into those environments and spontaneously just not have to work. They just don't even consciously, it's not even a thing. They just can't. It's not even, it's like there's parts of their brain that are just, and even if they wanted to, they still can't. Not really. Exactly. Yeah. And so with that said, that excites me because now you have the opportunity to go at the exercise lever. Say, look, now theoretically, look at what you've done and look at the progress that you've made. Yeah. That's unreal. And now how much easier is it theoretically to now start hitting the shopping lever a little better, the exercise lever a little harder, because there's just something now draining less of your mental emotional battery. Food and food choices, it's tremendously drain that battery. My goodness, I can't imagine. Especially when you feel guilt and shame and all those things. Absolutely. There's so much wrapped up in it. Okay, so now here's the other pushback. Mm-hmm. I was just looking at an article 2 days ago all about plastic surgeons having an unbelievable uptick in the number of people looking for Brazilian butt lifts because they all have Ozempic butt, which is to say they lost a bunch of weight and now they've discovered to their shock and horror that there's no muscle mass under there anymore. And so they have no posterior and they've gotten skinny, but they don't have a butt anymore. They want one back. So now they're going to have plastic surgery to put that back. To which I would submit that's what I'm afraid of, is we've gone, cool. We've got this magic wand for weight loss. Now we can just use the plastic surgeon to give us the shape we want.
It's not that I don't want people to use it and get healthy. I do. I absolutely do. I have very good friends that I have tentatively said, hey, have you considered this?
That's great. At least having the conversation.
Because I know them and I know their struggle. And I love them and I don't want them to die prematurely because of the billion different things that come from being morbidly obese. But I'm saying identity shift necessary to take on all those other behaviors that actually will, because just being skinny, yes, reduces likelihood of a bunch of things, but there is so much more.
Mm-hmm.
And I want people to find those other things. I worry that in our instant gratification world that we're missing that. Does that make sense? I am not saying to anyone, don't use it. I'm saying, don't forget the other parts.
Mm-hmm. But it's now easier than ever to talk about the other parts.
Yeah.
Because think about that. Think about that conversation before the emergence of medications that work as well, if not better than surgeries.
Right.
Before, hey, John, you have questions about exercise. That's awesome. You have questions about trying to eat a little bit better. That's great. Sleep, all these, all of these behaviors that they don't know which one to start with. And again, you theoretically dampen the food choice side of things. And now suddenly John's ready to talk about theoretically. That's my idealistic view, is that because the one is at least a bit dampened, not saying that you don't talk about the importance of, a varied diet and all those sorts of things. It's just that because of the dampening of the loudest thing, you can say, hey, that's great. But now look at what's possible, because you have the wherewithal to focus on exercise. You have the energy now to think about sleep a little bit. That's what's exciting.
You're right.
The same thing that scares you excites me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a cool, I don't know. I think that's a pretty cool dynamic.
It is the room, the bandwidth, the mental bandwidth to be able to have those conversations, to have the willpower to then try the next thing or what have you. Yeah. You're absolutely right.
What's the, not withdraw, but what's like the coming off of that? Or is it like, no, this is long-term now? So I know like with like certain antidepressants or those types of drugs, it's like, hey, this is not a long-term solution. This is just kind of get you through what you're navigating through. But for something like Ozempic or those types of things, hey, you're on this now, you lost weight because of the effects of this drug, and then you have to come off of it. Do those, hunger sensations come back and now you want the cookies and stuff again? And then so if there's not those disciplines that are built in that, hey, this opened up a world of possibilities, does it then all revert? Or is it like, hey, no, people are on this and they stay? I guess there's maybe limited scope on study.
Yeah. I mean, that is the $1 million question right now. Probably it's more than $1 million question.
Yeah. It's the billions and billions of dollar question.
But from at least my limited sort of understanding of that data that's available, is that you will maintain some of what was lost during that phase of you being on the medication. Now the extent of that will just vary, depending on the person. But it would also be unreasonable to think that, somebody who lost 20% of their body weight suddenly stopped taking it, that, oh yeah, why, it just kind of flies in the face of how this medication is actually how it's actually working. So to think that you can use this for 6 months and then just never have to worry again is just a fundamental misunderstanding. And so that scares people, that scares people. Oh no, now I'm going to be on this medication chronically. Well, I challenge you to kind of think of the flip side there. What would be the downsides then of slowly, reverting to maybe your previous body weight? I know it kind of is a roundabout answer. The short answer is you can and will theoretically maintain a chunk of that. But again, it's unreasonable to think that you will always maintain all of the weight loss. Now with Tyler's point, in a perfect world, if while you're using a medication like this, again, to, help facilitate other changes, then yes, maybe you have then equipped somebody to continue on, and maybe it's a little easier for them to maintain a healthy weight and healthy lifestyle. But it is recommended to be on this long term, because and also the last point I'll make is the cholesterol drug analogy, or the hypertension medication analogy. You don't just generally decide to stop taking blood pressure medication. Well, I've been on this long enough. My blood pressure's under control. I should be good at this point. Well, depending on the underlying mechanism by which the elevated blood pressure occurs, that may not be a reasonable solution. So just because you don't want to be on the medication, is that a good enough reason for a person to stop taking it? That would be a risk, as opposed to just continuing on the medication that is keeping you in a healthy range. Now, if you find that starting a blood pressure medication allowed you to maintain a healthy range, but you also changed your dietary pattern, you also started doing different sorts of exercise, you addressed sleep apnea, you did all these things, and then suddenly the need for the certain dose of the medication, or multiple medications, or medications altogether, you may have alleviated that need, but that's not how it always goes. The mechanism by which hypertension occurs in a lot of people is not always just I'm a little bit overweight, or I did this, or I did that. There's always the whole host of other factors that lead to it. So I just think the key point there is to challenge people to begin to look at the GLP-1 agonists as, well, why is that so much different than treating underlying hypertension?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was surprised that so I brought up that my friend, he went to the doctor's, it was a totally separate checkup, and they were so quick because he's not like severely obese or severely overweight. But he's always talked about his weight. But I was surprised at how quick, I wouldn't have anticipated him having that conversation and then bringing it up to me. But I'm going to have to tell him,
yep,
hey man, Brazilian butt lift in your future, That's what's happening. That's the
brilliant. Excellent.
Yeah.
I think you took the wrong thing from this conversation, Josiah.
But those are the pros and cons of just the media that's available to us. Right. I mean, certainly I think that being that we work and own a pharmacy, we're involved in compounding, we have nutritional supplements, we just live in that world.
Yeah.
I feel like I see those advertisements and I see that push to use these medications as much, if not more than anybody.
100%.
But it is the loudest push for a new medication that I can remember. I mean, we're talking about it on a podcast. Every health person talks about it on their podcast. It's on every advertisement.
Right.
There are really thoughtful conversations, like I think this one is around these drugs. And there are also really not thoughtful conversations around the use of those meds. And there's really, sleazy marketing for these drugs as well. And so you just have this weird blend that whenever your close friend comes to you and asks you about it, I mean, is it any wonder? I mean, It is just, we are flooded with good and bad and weird and everything in between around these drugs. So it's, we're in a good spot to be able to have this conversation.
Trying to separate the signal from the noise.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is just completely unprecedented. I mean, now with drug manufacturers, Lilly and such who've produced these medications, there are direct to consumer options because of the shortage of the actual injectable pens.
Yeah.
Now you can kind of go, if you meet certain criteria, you can go directly to the manufacturer.
Wow.
And you can theoretically acquire or be prescribed now the multi-dose vials.
Wow.
For a cash price, basically, for an out-of-pocket payment. Before it was you had to kind of look hard to find maybe a practitioner or some you had to dig a little bit to kind of maybe get started on these.
Right.
Now, in my estimation, you're one or two conversations or Google searches away from being on a telehealth platform, being prescribed. It's like, it is just on all levels unprecedented. You know, the days of drug marketing and, getting your doctor on board and the drug rep bringing samples. And then eventually the script makes it to the pharmacy and then you talk about it. Then you got to deal with insurance stuff. And it's this whole thing that has to be addressed before somebody can get started on this new drug. Now it's like, boom, like we got to get this out there.
Yeah.
You got to get started yesterday. Yeah. It's so intense. I don't blame anybody for asking tons of questions about it.
So what would your advice to me be if I'm going to have this conversation with my buddy? Because again, he randomly brought it up. There was a couple people around and I almost was like, whoa, you're going to talk to everybody about this? That your doctor said. It was like almost like
that destigmatization. But
that's what I'm saying. It's like, is it taboo? Is it not? I don't. So if you were to give me advice on the conversation with the friend of mine, what would it be?
I would say I'm a huge proponent of just trying to stay in your given lane, right?
Sure.
So I'm not saying that you are fully unequipped to give somebody advice in that situation, but like anything, I mean, you are as empathetic and as understanding of a listener as anybody, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the bread and butter of what you do.
Yeah.
So I think you lean into that and you just talk to them about, do you have a practitioner currently that you trust? Maybe understanding some of their concerns. Just what do you mean? Don't play the role of, well, you don't look that overweight. You don't look, I can't really tell. Like your waist looks skinny. You look strong. I say we try to get away from that quick assessment of somebody. Cause as in the periphery, I see that occur in conversations as, somebody asks a friend and they immediately, well, you don't need that.
Yeah.
You're fine. Yeah. And it's like, well, hold on. Somebody's just trying to talk about this. If it's on somebody's radar, you just hope that you can steer them into the direction of a practitioner, an expert in that arena that understands it. And if they do, then you do your part to try and destigmatize whatever solution that they come to. Hey, all I know is that these are helping a lot of people. Do I know it's a perfect solution for you? I have no idea. I don't know your medical history. I'm not a clinician. I don't know any of that stuff, but I do know if you feel like you want to have that conversation, you encourage them to not feel bad about bringing that up at their next appointment, as opposed to, come on, dude, just start training for the marathon with me. You'll be fine. Buck up. Let's go. I think that's the biggest thing.
The other thing I would think is leaning into the empathy, going, how can I help you? How can I support you in this? If you finding a practitioner, if you're not sure, get a second opinion. There's never that's never the wrong choice. But whatever you decide, let me know how I can help you. Mm-hmm. If it's helping you exercise, if it's giving you some pointers, if it's holding you accountable, if it's whatever, let me know what I can do, because I want to help you live a long time.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I need to ask his forgiveness because that was the quick, like he brought this up. I was like, dude, no, I was like, no, you don't. Blah, 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 blah.
And there's a way to still incorporate some of that. I mean, I don't know how well you know this guy. It's obviously your friend, so you can keep it real with the person. But now I think there is an understanding of what you do for a living, and hey, you're around this stuff, so you are a proxy for good or bad information. So you to an extent you have to be aware that you've put yourself in the crosshairs of those kind of conversations. Yeah, but that doesn't. But you have to. We all have to know our own sort of lane as well. That's like if somebody is like, hey, just because it's like, just because I went to pharmacy school and all of that, they hit me with well, do you think we should do radiation or we should do surgery? I'm like, dude, I can understand maybe what the doctor is talking about. Mm-hmm. in terms of what drugs are being used and why one option is better than the other and what the data says. I got no business having that conversation. And so there's still a way to play your role in that car. I don't just say like, dude, shut up. You know, don't ask me that question. How could you ever ask me that question? You know? So it is a fine line.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. People know I change my own oil. So when they start asking me about carburetors, I'm always like, I wouldn't ask me about that. I don't know anything about a carburetor. I know they're expensive. That's what I know. Yeah. And I have a good muffler guy that can help me out. But makes a good point.
I usually give this disclaimer when I'm like talking with people. I'm like, I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a counselor.
Right.
So if we come to the point where you need those services, like I will recommend those services to you, but I don't have that licensing, you know? So same kind of thing, I guess.
It is. That's exactly it.
So I could continue to riff on this. I have one more question.
Tyler's the boss here.
Look, you just put yourself adjacent.
You just put yourself in the crosshairs of that conversation.
Yeah. No, keep going. There's nothing wrong.
Okay. So the feeling I have,
I respect his creative direction. I mean, I have the utmost respect for it.
The feeling I have is I know.
You don't. I
do. All right. We got it on film, so I'm going to play it back for you.
So this friend of mine, he really enjoys, like, we play ice hockey together.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's physically active. He doesn't have like the discipline to get up and get going, maybe. Enjoys sports, loves tennis. He always feels like really good. So like some of that exercise dopamine hit, like that feel good. What if he's not getting that? Or you're saying it could possibly lead to that more after he starts taking it? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
are you concerned that taking Ozempic or a GLP-1 agonist is going to impact the dopamine hit he gets from exercise when he does engage in it?
Or so he's not getting that high anymore because, maybe at first he's not exercising. The goal is, hey, start taking this and it could lead to, open up this world of possibilities, like you said. Yeah. But at first he's not getting that. So it's just kind of like, hey, I got to make this part of my routine, and just like taking any other sort of medication or whatever.
Yeah. I to kind of reframe that, I would say it will, if theoretically this person starts taking a GLP-1 with any sort of lifestyle change or lifestyle adjacent sort of change, diet, whatever it is, the stock recommendation is often to not, bite off more than you can chew initially. Right. And so for a lot of people, it is this mad dash to, well, you know what? It's always wrapped in one. I got to start working out. I got to lose weight. I got to go to the grocery store. I got to sleep better. It's like you just get hit and you don't realize how big each one of those things are.
Right.
And we've probably talked 150 hours across all of our episodes about all of those things.
Yep.
So to try to package those into one nice little bow, severely underestimates how challenging it is to do each of those things. So if we look at how hard it is to maintain a health promoting diet, or how foreign it might be to somebody initially, if we look at how much of a change that often entails, then all we're saying is that by using something that kind of just shifts your perception of your hunger basically and changes your appetite, and you're just there's just less of a zest to it around food, I would say, is kind of what occurs for people. Then all that's doing is then opening the door to say, okay, wow, I'm using way less energy on the whole diet thing, that maybe I am a little closer to putting some of my eggs in the basket of an exercise routine, running, whatever it is. So does that kind of,
so you're saying,
I'm not saying I'm not saying that as soon as you go on a medication like this, that it should suddenly be easy to start lifting or suddenly easy to start sleeping better. I just think that I have an appreciation for the bandwidth that it requires to do all of those things all the time. That if there's one of those things that you can kind of you kick it right in the butt, that it sets you up to do the next thing better. He may never have a dopamine rush from a run, or he may not, but again, it should, in theory, in a perfect world, just give him the,
starting
the
block,
adequate bandwidth to do the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Pareto principle of to whom much is given, all more will be given. From him who has little, all will be taken away. I'm butchering it, but you know what I'm saying? That as you start to succeed, it makes each next success easier.
Like snowball.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge, big lever to get that ball rolling, but don't try and do it all at once.
Yeah.
So there is a feeling of like, okay, I feel good about what I'm able to accomplish or what this helped me accomplish. And now it can and hopefully will allow you to build momentum to do some of the things that we think help you live a larger life ultimately.
One more thing at a time, but just one at a time.
Yeah. I'm not a behavior change expert, but again, it is pretty much common practice to tailor the amount of changes that are going to be made, tailor that to what the individual can and theoretically is able to handle at one time.
Right.
We're all going to have different thresholds of what is a big change and what is not a big change. So, as somebody begins a GLP-1 or as they begin to lose weight, let's say, it may make more sense to focus on what sort of things now are you stocking your cabinet with? To say, hey, what are you stocking your cabinet with? What are you shopping for? And what are you eating socially? And did you lift 4 times this week? For an overachiever, like maybe that's not enough for somebody. Maybe they're just like ready to go.
Yeah. And
you lean into that. But if this person is just apprehensive out of the gate, they just have a certain temperament about them that's a lot, then it is, you start with what's theoretically next? What are you stocking your cabinet with?
And most people that have dealt with obesity for a long period of time, sounds awful, but diving in headfirst to all of the behaviors is not the way to go because it hasn't worked thus far. Most people that I know that are overweight have tried to do all of the things, have drawn the line in the sand 1,000 times, have and it is overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. What else, Josiah? Keep them coming.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. Like I said, I think I want to go back, not apologize, but be a little bit more encouraging to him. So
that's
awesome.
Yeah. That's great. It's great stuff. I think that it's admittedly hard to separate the element of you hear Ozempic or you hear one of these drugs and you immediately jump to like, it's almost like blood doping and cycling.
Right.
Like you just immediately, it's just like a reactionary sort of thing for people to say, well, hold on. You mean to tell me you can't just go to the gym a little bit? You mean to tell me you can't just like do this with your grocery list and stop eating so much pizza when you're, at so-and-so's house for the fantasy draft? Like, that's hard stuff. That's real life hard stuff.
Especially when it's a friend. It's like it's another guy, another dude. It's like, and your own lived experience. It's like, bro, I had to, do some of this too. Like I wish I was, whatever.
Having made these changes, I know, and I was not wheels off the cart, careening downhill out of control, but the changes I made were incredibly difficult to make stick. And it took a whole lot of thought and effort and planning and
so then you put
40 years of thinking about it.
You put that on other, so then when I turn to him, I'm like, well, come on.
Yeah.
I did this.
Yeah.
So,
so
then again, I'm not saying that's what it's easy to have that sentiment and not realize how it could be interpreted. It's not that there's no agency here, but there is a level of like, I did this. I know how I felt when I was running marathons. Mm-hmm. Come on. Like it's possible.
Yeah.
Like, is that going to move the needle for your friend? Like it's supposed to be your friend,
right.
If the goal is change,
keep
that focus, not do it the right way.
Exactly.
have a practitioner that I trust, I'll give him your number. I'll tell him to email the show at questions@askjoedimatteo.com.
We would do the same thing. It's like we just facilitate. There are certain things Joyce is really great for. She's great for a lot of things. And there will be instances, again, where so-and-so reaches out about cancer treatment choices. And maybe that's not somewhat, our bread and butter per se. We can at least triage to the next thing.
Yep. That's cool. We have so many things on the site. Sometimes it is hard for even somebody who eats, sleeps, and breathes this stuff to know the details of what is in every single product or why one would take it. So in the interest of trying to clarify some of that, what is in the bottle? What is Flora Essentials? That's one of the things that we have on the website. It's one of our oldest products from a probiotic standpoint. Mm-hmm. What is it? Why do we take it? What's it used for? Who needs it?
So Flora Essentials is one of multiple different probiotic products that we carry.
Yeah.
This specific product, Flora Essentials, is Saccharomyces boulardii. It's a single strain product, which is unique.
Yeah.
So what also makes it unique is that it's actually, because we always hear probiotic, good bacteria. In this case, it is actually a yeast strain.
Okay.
It has the properties of the probiotics that in general we all know about. But this one, again, its key characteristic difference and why it's in a single strain product is that it is derived from yeast. It's in a similar family to brewer's yeast, baker's yeast.
Okay. For those that are new to all of this stuff, what are probiotics? 10,000 foot view, 2-second version. What are probiotics? Why do we care?
Yeah, probiotics are good bacteria, good organism in this case more broadly. So they help to crowd out bad bacteria because it's key to have a balance in your gut of good and bad bacteria. Some more or less well-known benefits is they also aid in digestion with foods such as fiber and other resistant starches. They also can produce some beneficial substances along the way, namely short-chain fatty acids that are used to help build our gut barrier, the mucosal barrier in our gut. It also has an effect on inflammatory markers. So certain strains will help to decrease pro-inflammatory markers, such as interleukin-8. Other strains can increase anti-inflammatory markers, cytokines like interleukin-10. So in terms of supplementing with a product, which is ultimately what we're talking about here, studies have shown that probiotics do exert an effect through taking them in, through taking them orally, without colonization.
Okay.
So what's occurring again is you're taking in the probiotic, it's acting, it's working, it's doing what it does, but then it's not colonizing and growing and multiplying in your gut. So that is suggesting that for benefit, regular intake is needed.
Okay.
So there's good and bad. Obviously, you'd rather let me colonize with a good bacteria and then I'm good. The issue with if that was the case, you would then, again, we're looking for balance here. You would have an overgrowth of a specific strain that you're taking in. And then you would end up having a higher likelihood of the GI side effects that can occur when you take probiotics in general, but especially maybe too much.
Okay.
Such as gas, flatulence, bloating, constipation, particularly with Saccharomyces boulardii, upset stomach.
Okay. So the bacteria is there. We're trying to help it. We're trying to make sure that there's the correct balance. But for this particular one, because it's a yeast-based product, it does not colonize in the gut. It's not going to take root and take over, which is why you have to continually take it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And again, we'll kind of get to trying to kind of whittle it down here, but I'm not saying that you need to continue taking this one. We'll get to that.
Okay. So if this isn't something that everybody should be taking all of the time, which is good to hear because I haven't been taking it. Who is this for? Why do they need to take it? When do they need to take it? Help me out there.
Yeah, there are studies showing that there are multiple benefits here, but the core in terms of what's differentiating about it and in terms of where there's robust evidence is in antibiotic-associated diarrhea, acute diarrhea, C. diff, Clostridium difficile, the management of those symptoms, and broadly speaking, a balancing of the gut microbiome.
Okay, so people who are on probiotic or on antibiotics, people who are having uncontrolled diarrhea, and people with C. diff in particular, those are the primary targets of this probiotic.
Yes.
Okay. So then what is unique about this probiotic that it works particularly well for those folks?
Yeah. So in terms of, we'll kind of start with the first one, antibiotic associated diarrhea, and also just the dysbiosis, the imbalance of gut microbiome that occurs. That goes back to the first key component I mentioned, which is that it's a yeast product. So the way antibiotics work is they are basically destroying the cell wall, destroying the antibiotic itself. A yeast cell wall is not susceptible to that. So that's the key, that whenever you're intaking that, you're not, versus a traditional probiotic, which are great and have other uses, but that's the key there, is that this is not being affected. It's not being killed the moment right when you take it.
Okay, that's cool. That's fantastic. What about for folks with C. diff?
The key there with C. diff is that it typically follows antibiotic exposure.
Okay.
So it's kind of the cascade of effects, that there's a disruption of the gut microbiome, and then there's exposure. Oftentimes you see C. diff, it's primarily elderly, nursing homes, hospitals, those types of infections.
Yeah.
But in that, it is typically very severe. So that the key there is that this has been studied. And then, like I mentioned earlier, and the other component regarding C. diff, besides the balancing of the microbiome, is that there are fatty acids, short-chain fatty acids, also in the colon, and that antibiotics disrupt the bile acid metabolism in the colon. So what then occurs is that C. diff then has a breeding ground to, if there's exposure, to multiply, to colonize, and to cause infection and symptoms.
Got it. Okay. And so this helps to counteract that by helping to crowd it out.
Correct.
Take up that space and give the other bacteria room to repopulate.
Yes, and it helps also to decrease the symptoms. So it's not anti-infective. It's not going to replace vancomycin or whatever antibiotic you may be using for C. diff, but it helps with symptoms. It helps to shorten the duration. And it also helps to prevent reinfection, which is common in C. diff.
That makes sense. What does dosage typically look like for somebody who's taking it for one of those things? What is that going to look like?
Yeah. So for children, it's typically 250 milligrams to 500 milligram. So that's 1 or 2 capsules of Flora Essentials. Adults you start at that higher end of the range. So 500 milligram up to 1,000.
Okay.
It has been studied in those doses as effective and safe.
And is it with meal, on its own, separate times a day? How does that work?
You can go either way with this one. And the question we get a lot is, I'm on an antibiotic. What do I do? And it's kind of back to the same thing. The reason why you're taking this in the first place is because it's not affected by the antibiotic. So whatever time of the day you're taking that, you're fine.
Great. That's fantastic. What else? Are there any other studies, anything that you want to cover that helps to flesh out this conversation?
Yeah. So beyond just antibiotic associated diarrhea, acute diarrhea itself. So that's from any cause, which could be bacterial, viral, parasitic, could be a medication, IBS, various conditions that you have, whatever the cause. Saccharomyces boulardii has been shown effective in decreasing symptoms. Again, we're not saying treating. We're not saying not to treat your IBS, not to treat that bacterial infection. Right. We're saying that in managing both the symptoms related to acute diarrhea and to the reoccurrence, Flora, Saccharomyces boulardii, has been shown to be effective. Okay, so acute diarrhea itself is defined as 3 or more watery or loose stools per day. So that at least gives you a marker there.
Yeah.
Again, Saccharomyces boulardii has shown to decrease the symptoms and the duration of diarrhea. So for example, there was a study done in the American Academy of Pediatrics. It was a systematic review of studies. So I like these. It's a study of studies.
Yep.
Okay. So the inclusion criteria was so strict. They looked at 1,248 studies. And I thought, wow, this is huge. This is great. And it is because they're looking at them, but they only had 22 that met the inclusion criteria.
Wow.
So just even broadly speaking, when you look at something like this, you could have pulled 1,200 other studies that would have shown maybe a bias or was not properly set up in one way or another that could have led you to a given conclusion. So that's why I really like this one. Again, at first I thought, oh no, only 22. Yeah. I wanted this larger, but it also makes sense because you're dealing with supplements, you're dealing with a probiotic, you're dealing with a pool of data that is always a little more controversial. Yep. Put it that way. So out of the 22 that met that inclusion criteria, Saccharomyces boulardii significantly reduced duration of diarrhea. The mean difference was 19.7 hours.
Okay, wow.
So significant.
Yeah.
Day 2 frequency of diarrhea was decreased by 3/4 on average, 0.74. Day 3 was further reduced by 0.41, and these are all compared to controls. So that significant decrease at every step of the way, and I think the key thing here is regardless of source or cause of infection. I want to emphasize again, this does not mean not to treat though. I have diarrhea.
Right,
I don't want to take an antibiotic. I'm just going to take Flora. I'm only having diarrhea. That's not going to treat the underlying infection. So we still recommend that you get seen medically and traditionally. But what this can do is be an adjunct that probably isn't going to be recommended to you that has been shown to be effective.
Very cool. That makes a lot of sense. And I love that clarification. Always good. What else you got?
So there was also one of these kind of broad systematic analysis of studies. This was in the Therapeutic Advances in Gastroenterology.
Okay.
So they kind of went in a little more detail in each study, and I'm not going to go into all these. But the main one here regarding acute diarrhea is that they looked at 100 hospitalized adults, and they gave Saccharomyces boulardii for 5 days.
Okay.
They found that it significantly reduced the mean duration and the frequency of the acute diarrhea. They also found effectiveness in prevention of travel diarrhea, eradication of H. pylori stomach infections.
Wow.
Symptoms of Crohn's disease were significantly reduced in patients, again, after post-acute treatment.
Right.
So again, what that's saying is patients have been treated for a Crohn's flare. 3 months of treatment, outcomes were better in Saccharomyces boulardii treated patients than patients on placebo. They found similar effects post-treatment in ulcerative colitis, IBS, and parasitic infections.
Man, that's fantastic. So literally, it doesn't matter why you're experiencing this.
If you're experiencing this and you're dealing with the root cause, this can help with the symptomatology significantly, as well as balance your inflammatory markers and your gut microbiome overall. So again, a larger scale potential benefit, but this is what we can pin down and be certain of.
That's fantastic. That's really, really cool. That's it for us this week. If you would like to check any of the studies that we referenced, those are all available in the show notes section of wherever you happen to be listening to this. If you'd like to check out any of the products that we mentioned, those are all available on our website. That is askjoedimatteo.com. That's askjoedimatteo.com. That site is also where you can sign up for our newsletter. You can find past episodes of this show, as well as episodes of the show that started all of this, the Ask the Pharmacist show. You can email us questions if you'd like to know something. Questions@askjoedimatteo.com is the email address. Big thanks, as always, to Michael Depesh, our editor, Josiah Schweinberg, the engineer, Joey, Dante, and the rest of the crew. That's it for us. Have a great week.